This is Brian Yellow and episode 12 of Origin Stories on Creativity. I got to speak with Joshua Robertson, interesting writer. Started out as a master social worker, been writing since he was a teenager, obviously, D&D player, athlete in high school. Now, all he does is write. Got to live the dream. 80,000 followers on WordPress, 30,000 followers on Twitter. Lives in North Carolina, has lived in Alaska, has a brood of children, has a YouTube channel called The Goblin Horde with his wife. Was a good guy. He had a lot of interesting things to say. His contact information is going to be in the show notes. His novel is Anarfell. I believe it is out. His website is robertsonwrites.com. You can check me out. brianyellow.com is my website. Follow me at dryyellow on Twitter. I don't think I have anything else to say. So here is Joshua Robertson. You are a master social worker? Does that mean you have a master's in social work?
Yes, I'm a licensed master social worker, which means that I have a degree in social work as well as my license to practice.
I find that interesting because I was reading a little bit of your the description of your novel, and it's about two brothers who do the bidding of the father, right?
Yes.
Basically,
yes.
It's a dark fantasy work where the detail about that. I mean, basically, being a social worker, you're dealing with really anyway.
Yeah, you know, that concept for the Blood of Dragons in the first book, Anarfell, was something that my brother and I came up with almost 15 years ago. A lot of folks know this that follow my work, but J.C. Boyd is my brother too. And we came up with this idea about writing a story about two brothers who are essentially underneath the thumb of their father, who's been abusive to them. And you see them struggling with a lot of internal things about what's right and what's wrong and what they should be doing and what they want to be doing. And then, of course, having their father still have control over them, even as they get into their adult life. And there's a big piece of my background that went into that and looking at trauma and how it impacts us even into adulthood.
It's fascinating. So it's not that these are that want to be doing evil.
Right. Yeah. They definitely do acts that are evil, but they're not always necessarily happy with the things that they're doing. It's more that their father's telling them to do something and they don't want to displease him. They want his acceptance, more or less. And they've always been trying to gain that. And even in adulthood, they haven't achieved it.
That's fascinating. And you've been in the field of social work for how long?
About 15 years now in social work. I started off as a behavior specialist working at a residential school with children with developmental disabilities and autism. I had a lot of different jobs there, including being a supervisor, the behavior specialist. I worked front lines with the other staff for a long time. I worked in crisis intervention. From there, I went and worked at a psychiatric ward for 3 years where I was a supervisor, and I did my work in my practicum as a therapist. And then I went on and I was a therapist for a couple of years working with children in child welfare. And from there, I became a trainer and I trained other professionals for almost a year before going and working with the military for 2 years and training their staff.
Oh, interesting. Were you in the military yourself?
I wasn't. I was a contractor with the military. Okay. I did apply to be in the military and I got accepted for a commission as an air and space officer, but I ended up turning it down.
Air and space?
Yes.
It's interesting. I was in the Army myself. I drove trucks.
I remember reading that. Gotcha.
What would you have done as an air and space officer?
Well, to my knowledge, it's really working at places like Clear Air Force Base up in Alaska, which I spent some time up there. I was in Alaska for 2 years. Yeah, that's where I worked for the military. It was 2 years up there, and I got to spend some time down at Clear, where they really watch the airspace. They watch what objects are floating through space, what satellites have broken up, what things may interfere with, telecommunications, or just essentially seeing what could potentially be coming from other countries or not. Mm-hmm. I'm not an expert in it because I didn't go into it, but it's a lot of that. It's managing the other officers that are lower rank or the airmen, and helping them essentially run the program to watch our air in space.
Being a writer, you're obviously interested in a lot of different facets of life, and being up in Alaska, you got to see something that, the tundra. Love to see it myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful up there. And I
Yeah.
know before we hit the live button, you were talking about how you're reading Anarfell. I wrote Anarfell when I was in Alaska, and you will see a lot of that reflected in there. I mean, that story already takes place in the northern environment, but as it goes further into the book and the darkness starts to set in and the days become shorter and shorter, they experience the same things that I've seen up there. I think the coldest it got up there when I was up there was -68.
-68. Wow. When it gets that cold, the inside to experience it, or do you just stay bubbled up?
You stay inside
You
as much
hike,
as you
you stay
possibly
inside
can. Yeah, you step
somehow.
outside, and if you've been up there, it's a fascinating experience. But I mean, even at -30, you step outside, and your eyelids kind of freeze, and your nose hairs freeze. You can almost taste the ice on your breath. It's cold.
New
Uh,
guys that got stationed up there too.
you knew a
I
guy that
mean,
did?
no, I knew people that did, and they had to do army things. They
Yeah,
had to go outside and do things. I was like, I couldn't imagine it. I mean, I got stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and we had to do army stuff at 32 degrees, and that was miserable.
Yeah, I actually knew a lot of guys that worked over on the army base up there at Fort Wainwright. Funny enough, I come from a small town in Kansas, but even guys from my small town who went into the military were up there stationed while I was up there. So I had some familiar faces, even 4,000 miles away from home. But yeah, but the cold up in Alaska is different. It's not the same. I mean, in Kansas, where I come from, it's really cold there. I mean, you got 70-mile-per-hour gusts of winds and ice storms coming in all the time, and it chills you straight to the bone. Alaska's a dry cold. It's not so much that you're freezing or you even have that wind that really intensifies it. It's just it immediately essentially chills your body and freezes you.
You have
It hurts the skin.
yeah. Oh my God. Tell me, the wind is what gets you, and then when the like -68 degrees, I can't imagine how bad that would feel.
Hmm. I fell in the snow
You,
once while I was up there and it was cold, and I couldn't get it indoors fast enough. My hands were hurting so bad.
man, I can imagine. Did you go? Do you hunt?
I don't hunt actually. I don't hunt. I used to fish some, but I haven't fished in a number of years. But hunting is a big thing up there. Almost everybody that goes up there is hunting.
How'd you avoid it?
How did I avoid hunting? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote books.
See, okay.
Yeah.
You're more the thinker than the actually getting out there and do. I'd love to try to hunt. Honestly, I've never done it,
Uh,
obviously, but I'd like to try the whole, viscerate the animal and tear it apart and see the parts and beginning to end and see how it works. I've never actually done it before though.
yeah, I grew up country. I mean, I grew up in the country in Kansas, and it was a big thing out there where I grew up at. Everybody went deer hunting. I went rabbit hunting a couple of times, but I was never really a big hunter. I was always more of the thinker. Which Alaska for me was a great environment for that. It's dark 8 months out of the year. I got to just essentially sit inside and write books.
Yeah, this is my worst time of year. The sun's out all the time. I hate it so much. So I mean, it's got to be tough. I mean, you have a tough job though. You're kind of, I would imagine, an introvert, wanting not to deal with people, but public having
You know,
to.
we could probably talk about that for the whole hour in itself, Brian. I've always considered myself being an introvert, but I went through a couple of years of some pretty intensive work on myself just through meditation, and I
Hmm.
honestly changed my Myers-Briggs around so that I now reflect more of an extrovert. Um,
Oh,
and it,
seriously.
yeah, and it was just essentially studious work in terms of finding my place in terms of socializing and connecting with people. So I don't necessarily consider myself an introvert so much anymore. I do need my personal time to kind of regain energy, but it's not as frequent as it used to be when I was younger.
And it never reasserts itself. You never find yourself wanting to kind of pull back into that cave of isolation.
I honestly don't. There's a lot to be said about how we are these biological, connective creatures that really strive to have that interaction with one another. And it was really just coming to a place where I was able to embrace that.
What caused the desire to shift? I mean, usually we're kind of who we are. You know, the self is very protective of itself. How did you decide that you wanted to be different?
Absolutely, that's very insightful. I actually recognized an issue and with myself. I mean, with myself working in social work and being a therapist and connecting with clients in itself was draining because that work is very hard. Um, but I
Oh yeah, I
found
would imagine.
but I found that I was intellectualizing emotions, which was disallowing me to be empathic to my full ability. And so I wanted to be able to connect with clients better on an emotional level in order to help them work through whatever trauma they were dealing with or whatever issue they were bringing to a session. And so it was really something I felt like I needed to do in order to connect with the client and help them work through what they were going through instead of trying to intellectualize every issue they were having. Kind of goes back to the old idea that sometimes you just need somebody to listen to you and validate what's going on with you in order for you to find your way out of the dark instead of somebody shining the flashlight and say, run this way.
And could you explain that a little bit more? And as
Yeah,
you were talking, I kind of imagined a kid looking for you to help them and you missing them.
yeah. There's a lot of different philosophies out there in terms of different ways to connect with clients, and I've always been a proponent of client-centered approaches. I've been around a lot of therapists who have a tendency to just want to tell the client how to fix a problem and what to do. And that's never really the most effective way. It's better for clients to recognize their own solutions instead of having a therapist just tell them how to fix it. And to be honest, most people already know what they need to do. If you ask the right questions, people can tell you what they're supposed to do. Um, but there's, I think, something internal in each of us where we're kind of stubborn, and somebody tells you what to do, you're not as willing to follow through with the plan than if you come up with it yourself.
That's very interesting. I listened to a podcast today where a Navy SEAL he
Brian, you broke up there. I had you at Navy SEAL and then you disappeared.
you know what I'm saying? You failed, then you are the failure. But if you
Mm.
succeed, then you're the success because it's your plan. But if you succeed on his plan, then he's the success.
I don't know. I don't know if you're familiar with Love and Logic. It's one of the parenting classes that I used to teach for a long time. But oftentimes it comes down to that same idea that even in our teenage years, we get to this idea that we want to rebel against our parents, and
Mhm.
because we want to win, and the only way that we can win is by not letting them win. And so that you argue against whatever rule they set up for you, whether it's who you can date or what you can believe or how hard you're going to work at school. And so you compete against them just for the sake of winning.
Uh-huh.
But if you approach a child as a parent in a much different way, and instead of just telling them what to do, helping them rationalize it and find reason in their decisions without telling them what's right or wrong, children will most of the time find the right decision just based on the natural consequences.
It's fascinating. It's such a wonderful way to explore conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a fun way for writing. I mean, bringing it
Yeah.
back full circle, because I like to throw my characters into terrible situations that are extremely difficult to get out of, which we've all felt that way as teenagers. I think every teenager goes through an existential crisis. But you throw your characters into these situations, try to figure out without giving them any real way out, and then seeing how they're going to be able to use just natural consequences and problem solving to find their way from that and succeed.
And you weren't trained as a writer. I mean, I understand. I did listen to that 30-minute conversation that you had on the recording on your website.
Yeah.
I understand that you played some D&D, or you are D&D. Everybody does who likes the fantasy, but you're not a trained creative writer.
Yeah, I
um,
didn't go
it
to school
basic,
for it.
but you've been writing since you were 15 years old. So um, here's my question, right? That's why we're here. Where does your where do you come up with your ideas for the conflict, basically? And that
I actually started writing younger than 15. I finished my first book about 15, 16 years old, somewhere in there. But for me,
you finished a book when you were 15 years old.
yeah, I still got it sitting over here. I've never sent it off anywhere before. It's a testament to how much I've improved since then. um,
Have you
but
cracked it open
I have. It's painful to look at.
on me completely? Have you cracked it open since?
I have. I've actually looked at it frequently. Probably about every 3 to 6 months or so, I'll pull it back open and look at it and compare it to
Wow.
whatever the newest thing is that I publish and say, okay, yeah, that's what it used to be.
Or you kind of, do you shiver with like, I've grown so much as an artist?
Well, even my first book that I published, Melkorka, which I feel is a good book. It's got a lot of strong concepts in it. I open that one up sometimes as an author and still cringe because there's mistakes in there now that I don't make anymore in my writing, whether it's using passive voice or too many adverbs or not moving the plot along in the correct way, which are things that I think that the general reader isn't going to catch, but other writers are definitely going to pick up on.
Would be surprised. Readers are very, very intelligent when it comes to things like that. I mean, those are, but the reader's not going to say that's passive voice. It's going to ring, hollow to their ear. They're not going to want to read beyond. It's, uncomfortable, but
yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that you're right. Yeah.
But those are terms that I would, learn in a creative writing workshop. Where did you come up with them at?
I've always been studious in nature, and so I spend a lot of time, whether it's taking online seminars or just reading up on things. I mean, I own the Chicago Manual of Style that I've read through. I do have a master's degree, which in a soft science, which requires a lot of writing to be done. I mean, every class had a paper that was due that was 16 to 18 pages long. Which for that, of course, is more technical writing. Both of my practicums that I did was doing technical writing as well. It was rewriting policy manuals for companies. But for creative writing, I think it's just been something that's always been an escape for me. It, again, started when I was really young. It was kind of a way just to go out into my own world. I read a lot when I was younger, too. And as I've gotten older, a lot of my ideas come from dreams, which I know sounds pretty cliche as a writer, but I dream very vividly. I dream about 3 to 5 times a night. They're very vivid, and so a lot of ideas originate from a dream.
Are you one of the? Do you journal when you wake up? Do you write the dreams down? Do you dream journal? I mean, I guess the term is.
Yeah, I used to. I don't anymore.
And I do not remember my dreams at all.
I don't know what it is that causes folks to remember them. Honestly, I've always been pretty quick to remember whatever it is that I've dreamt of the night before. And like I said, they're very vivid. I've dreamed full lifetimes in a single night, and I can lay out, from beginning to end of a lifetime of going through things, whether it's, being raised and going to war and getting married and having children and dying. And I can remember the entire dream of what happened.
Pretty fascinating mind. I can tell that. I mean, I wish my mind was actually more functional right now so I can, actually talk to you a little bit more. I am asleep right now normally, but I'm so happy I'm able to talk to you. But I can tell already that you have a fascinating mind and it works in a very particular way. You're not artistically trained, but you're definitely trained in writing. It's fascinating. How many books have you written so far?
I think the book that we have coming out on June 7th called Blood and Bile, which is another co-written book with my brother and I think that will be my 16th publication.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is really cool. Are you excited for?
So many things I'm excited for. This is honestly the best book I think we've ever put out.
Because it's your newest book, or because it's honestly your best one?
It is.
Every story I write is my best one.
It's honestly my best one, which I have to give a lot of credit to JC on this one. Mm-hmm. Because this is a book that's going to be introducing his dark fantasy world. It's the first one of his series, which I was very happy that he let me come and play in his sandbox to help him create this. And he just offers a lot to fantasy that I don't think people have seen for a long time in that works. It's based off Norse mythology. JC has a master's in English literature, so he is trained in writing. and which does help balance me out. You know, if I do make a mistake and he reads through one of my early drafts, he can quickly say, "Hey, Josh, go fix that." Um, but it's got some older language in it. It's based around Norse mythology, and it's based around this story of these giants in the far north when the world is very, very young, and they get infested with this hunger spirit that essentially turns them into giant zombies.
What are the giants called?
They're called the Thursar.
A flash fiction about them. I made tons of stuff up, but that's cool. That's fantastic. How many books have you written with him?
This will only be our second book that we've written together. We have the sequel to Anarfell should be out in October. So we're working on that one as well. And then the sequel to Blood and Bile, we're hoping to have done by January of next year.
What's it like sharing the writing duties with your brother?
It's honestly wonderful. I know that we've had
What?
a lot of folks look at us with a with kind of a crazed eye that we're able to pull this off. But my brother and I have been best friends since we were really young. Even since we were kids, we were creating games and writing stories together, and being very imaginative. So it only makes sense that we've grown up to do the same thing in our adult life.
That's really cool. I wish me and my brother had that kind of relationship. I tried. He rebelled against it completely. Very competitive. Did not work out at all. How do you think that? How was the difference in age between you two?
We're 2.5 years apart. I'm 2.5 years older than he is.
He is okay. The younger one, and he's a professor.
He actually works right now as an editor for a company where he rewrites their policy manuals, and does that type of thing. But he's got a master's in English literature, did a lot of works on phonetics and etymology of words in his undergraduate program. His mind definitely is equally fascinating, I guess, if you want to label me with that. But I usually put him a tier above me. He's a very intelligent guy.
What? Let me ask you this then, since we're talking about your family, if you got your mind, you and your brother, tell me about your parents.
Well,
What
my,
are they
my
like?
parents have always been really big into pushing us to excel. My
Hmm.
mom, especially, I have to give credit for that. She was very strict about us doing our studies and doing our schoolwork and getting good grades. All my family, I feel, has done exceptionally well in whatever their pursuits have been. I'm number two out of six children. But she was very big on working hard. Straight A's was the way it had to be. You need to be valedictorian of your class. You need to be involved in every curricular activity that was available to you.
You were an
Essentially,
athlete in school.
yeah, basketball and track. Yep.
Okay. And you were the valedictorian in your class.
You know, shamefully, I'm the only one of my siblings who was not the valedictorian. I did not live up to that measure.
Wow.
I
So,
had a 3.97, I think, when I graduated, and I was ranked number seventh in my class.
oh, that's shameful. Do you think it matters,
Being valedictorian,
or having a 3.97?
I don't. You know, I'm one of those folks that even in college, I never really bought a book going to class. I just sat there and listened, and then I went and took the tests. I didn't really ever read the material. I just kind of went
You
and
have that brain, though. I don't know, but do you?
I don't know. I got a lot of slack for, if you just applied yourself and studied, you'd be doing a little bit better. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm passing. I was a bit too pragmatic about it, maybe.
What about? I mean, honestly, I did talk to a guy just recently. He's a really fascinating character. Thoughts. He blessed me with a 2-hour conversation. He wrote a book called The Straight A Conspiracy,
Hmm.
uh, about grades and education and how it towards the of facts and regurgitating them for tests, and how it's basically geared to the dude who can more than it is for the guy who can enjoy learning the material. You think that it's a fair system?
I really
I
don't
mean,
think.
for somebody who's actually working in the your line of work, and you're working with people who are getting squashed.
Yeah, I'm probably unhealthy in my criticism towards public education, especially.
Opinion.
I do have a lot of criticisms about public education and where it's drifted in the past 20 or 30 years. I'd like to see different things occur with our education system. because I don't think it's necessarily designed for everybody. And I do think that it's eliminating our ability to critically think the older that we get, which I think is exceptionally important with social media and the growing access that we have to knowledge. I'm putting that in quotes online, because it disallows our ability to really determine what's real and what's not real. Um,
Mm.
and I think that that's a huge loss. Um, the education system for me, I really struggled with it. And I've talked about this openly many times that school was not a big challenge for me. I do owe a lot to my teachers and the time spent. I mean, I was raised in a small school with small classrooms. And so I was able to get some one on one time and even have some specialized classes of my choosing because I had that freedom to, I guess, have more of that Montessori type of response where I could say, hey, I want to go learn this. I'm going to go take a semester and do this for a while. And they would just create that class for me. But for a lot of it, I mean, I was very bored in college. I didn't enjoy college.
Mm.
It was busy work, and I didn't really feel like I grasped a lot out of it.
One of those kids who went to college 22, you graduated. I don't know what you did after 22. Did you go to the workforce or did you go to grad school?
I actually worked full time while I was in college. I worked 55
Oh, yeah.
hours a week. I started college when about a week after my 18th birthday. I graduated from college when I was 21. I went into graduate school immediately, still working full time in the field of my study. Um, I got really bored with college, and so I ended up quitting. I am ashamed to say, and I
Shameful of, right? I
it,
mean, you were bored.
yeah, so I took some time off and I pursued ministry for a little while. I did some
Ministry.
online classes, which I really enjoyed online classes and doing that. It was more of the environment for me. Um, and then I ended up
Ministry show
about
up in your fiction at all?
what's that? The ministry?
Show up in your fiction at all?
A little bit. I usually try not to touch on that one too much, honestly. But then I
It's
ended up going
interesting to me
back to
because
college.
in fantasy you have a lot of religious overtones. I mean, for me particularly, I like the paladin character
Hmm.
class. I like that the overtones of, you have gods and clerics and priests and things of that nature all in your stories at all.
Yeah, I absolutely have all of that, to be honest with you, Brian. I try not to poke at religion too much. I'm more of a critic there as well. Man, I'm sounding like such a critic tonight. But
What do you mean?
well, I was just saying how much I like poking things out at society and kind of showing the inconsistencies of things in my fantasy fiction. I find fantasy to be one of those platforms where it's a safe
Works.
place to essentially poke at things, where people are able to
Writing in
stomach it a
general,
little bit
right?
better. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I have a whole pantheon of gods in there. The big part of my series is actually the antagonist is using religion to gain control over the world, where he's trying to get everybody to follow his god and his ways, and the protagonist is essentially butting heads against that. It's more of a subtle type of message, but it's definitely there. If people were to pick apart the novels, they're going to see that I'm poking at religion and how hypocritical it is.
Hmm. The antagonist is the father character.
It is a male, yes, but he's not a father. In my overall series,
Huh.
no,
I
in Anarfell, it's not that guy.
um so just to go back to um I'm jumping around, I apologize. You're a really fascinating guy. You're making me want to explore a lot of the uh, but to go back to your social work and education,
Hmm.
you said something interesting about growing older and social media that I wanted to explore about opinions and how we generate them. It made me think how education just kind of stops for people. Generally, in this country, at least 75% of people stop learning when they're 18 years old.
Hmm.
Maybe you learn a trade, but you're never going to like pick up a math book generally after 18. Calculus.
Right.
I think in this country to make a difference with people or
Did
to
you say what?
learn something. I
Did you say what do I think needs to happen?
and you're you deal with families, you deal with fathers, you deal with mothers, you deal with grandparents, you deal with kids as they're growing older. It's not just 15-year-olds and younger. How do you think we can make a difference?
Oh, you should have prepared me for this one. um, I'm gonna have to give this one some thought. There's a lot of stuff education wise that I think that we miss out on. I know that I talked to a senator when I was younger about the potentiality of having a parenting class be mandatory for people in order to graduate from high school. And although there's a lot of fun that I can poke at our public school system or school system in general, a lot of it I think comes back down to the home environment and parents being able to essentially coach their kids in those first 5 years to really prep them for the real world. And I hate to poke at parents with that, but I think that's where a lot of the failing comes from. I mean, we're talking about education. The child's brain is the most malleable in those first 3 years. And you
Yeah.
really have a set personality in that child in the first 6 years. And so you want to have the home environment be as open as you can to help that child have several different pathways in order to grow on, in terms of building skill sets and building resilience and being able to have a hunger for knowledge and rising above whatever the status is. And I think that's where we're lacking at a lot. I think that a lot of parents are stressed and they're doing the best with what they can do, but those
And it's like the
early years for
hardest
the
time to
child
be a
is where we're
parent
struggling.
too. Those
I'm sorry.
first 3 years, so exhausted. I have two kids. They're twins, boy and a
Hmm.
girl. They're 2 years old right now. My butt. They're so hard to be a parent to kids that age. I know it's really important too,
Yeah,
but it's easy to say, you know what, do whatever you want to do.
it is super difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
talking father to father, I know how hard that it is to really be what's what I'm looking for to be available to a child. I mean, every child needs a parent 100% of the time, and the more kids you
Mhm.
have, the harder it is to offer yourself up that frequently.
Yeah.
But even a really simple thing we know is that a child by the age of 9 months is smarter than your average household pet, which means that they understand cause and effect and they understand consequence. And parents oftentimes don't start really implementing consequences on the child until almost 2.5 years old, because that's when the child starts speaking. That's when a child starts using words like no, and the parents like, oh, they can talk now, they can understand me. Well, their receptive communication skills are intact long before they can verbally express themselves. And so it's teaching parents appropriate ways of implementing consequences for a child at 9 months that doesn't involve, physical abuse or being loud or giving or interacting with the child in a way that's going to frighten the child, because we know that frightening children in any way shuts off all the learning centers of their brain and it jumps them back to their amygdala, which allows them to have all these different responses that are not helpful to their brain development. And so it's so I know I'm getting kind of technical with this, but there's a lot that comes into child rearing that the average parent doesn't know.
I took some basic psychology classes. It does sound kind of technical. I know what the amygdala, yeah. Well, I guess it's a little more technical than my vocabulary is allowing me to say with my tongue. I really think that, unfortunately, it's a complicated subject in
It really
terms.
isn't.
It really is. I took one class in childhood development.
Hmm.
That in one semester they're only able to get to like 3 years old. I mean, that's how difficult we are as a species. That once we're able to get 3 years worth of development.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about education, oftentimes that's in the framework of looking at the IQ of an individual. And education, I think, where we're really failing first is helping raise the emotional intelligence of our children and getting them to a place where they're healthy enough to be able to learn. And we know that it's not necessarily your grades that determine success, but it's how well you get along with people in life. And so it's trying to find ways to really enhance that empathy and that emotional connectiveness with children when they're really young. And to be honest, frankly, a lot of parents don't offer that to their children. They tell them to stop crying, to quit it, to go to their room, to not act a certain way. And when we shut off those emotions like sadness and fear and hurt, and only give the child the option of being happy or being mad, it really essentially cripples them from being able to have a successful future when they start being around peers in school. And when they can't do that, they can't learn.
That's really fascinating. That's really interesting. Cutting off any other emotions besides being happy.
You see it a lot.
Considered
I've
that
worked with
you're either
thousands
happy
of
or
I've worked with thousands of clients. I taught anger management for over 5 or 6 years, and it's what you see from them. They know happiness and they know anger. They don't really accept that they're ever sad or scared or hurt, and it's because their parents told them they weren't allowed to be when they were really young.
you're not allowed to be bored either.
Yep, you're not
And
allowed to be
that's
bored either. And the human range of emotions is really long. I mean, we have a huge spectrum of emotions. We can't
broad.
just limit it to one or the other.
And you know what? You're not allowed to be interested in things other than what you're told to be interested in. And you're not allowed to be tired, and you're not allowed to be. Going back to the idea of education, I really do think it's a lifetime
I
something
agree.
you do between the ages of and 18. I think that you should be allowed to school between 6 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Hmm.
I don't know. I really think it's interesting. And you are a fantasy writer, and we have talked about your social work because, unfortunately, right now we have a very fascinating world around us.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And honestly, if I sound rusty, I apologize because I actually haven't been practicing social work for almost a year now. I've been writing full time. So
Oh, what a fantastic situation to be in, right?
yeah, I recently, I mean, after working in social work for 15 years, I finally got to a place where I was able to step back and just write full time. So I'm enjoying that. It's
Why
a nice
not?
break, not as much stress.
Well, I mean, what's the future look like for you then? I know you have a novel coming out.
It's honestly a lot of writing coming up. Like I said, I'm working on another book to come out this summer after Blood and Bile called The Highborn Long Walker. Then I have another one in October and another one next January. I have a couple of Comic Cons that I'll be doing in August, and I'm hoping to set up a fall tour here in the next several months to move around the North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee area at different bookstores.
Are you doing New York Comic Con by any chance?
I'm actually not doing the New York Comic Con, but hopefully in a future year I'll be there.
Okay, it's a cool one.
Yeah.
I've been to it a few times.
Yeah, I'm considering starting to look at agents and maybe even big publishers this year, but we'll see what the dice give me.
I mean, you've got a pretty big following, right? I mean, according to your Amazon, you're a best-selling fantasy author. How is the agent for you?
The main reason that I want to look at getting an agent is taking the extra step for the things that I don't fully know how to do myself, which is selling
Mhm.
foreign rights, looking into movie deals or Netflix episode stuff,
Uh-huh.
and having wider distribution. Now I have distribution to bookstores. I gained that this year. But I'm happy with the following. I blogged for 2 years before I published my first book, which was almost 3 years ago, and it's been nice.
What did you blog? What were you blogging?
I was writing. It was poetry, short stories, flash fiction, just updates on my novels and what I was working on. A lot of things
That's what
like
I'm doing right now too, is the poetry flash fiction thing. I'm just throwing as much fiction as I can with the world right now.
that's awesome. That's what I actually tell a lot of young writers to do is before you publish that first novel, you need to be out there in the world. Build a newsletter, get on social media, start connecting with people. I think that's one of the things that's helped me. So right now, I think
Yeah.
I've just reached a little over 30,000 followers on Twitter. I have about an 85,000 reach on my blog. My newsletter list is getting close to 3,000
Wow.
right now. It's been growing significantly, which
Interesting.
I'm proud of.
How long did it take you to get to 85,000?
Well, that's the recent date. So I think I've been hanging out there now since about January, so almost 6 years.
That's fantastic. Where do you blog at?
WordPress, which you can get there through my website. If you go to the robertsonwrites.com, there's a link there to my blog.
Okay, I'll follow you. Definitely, I'll check it out.
And now
I'll
I don't
put a link on the show notes too.
I use that now more for really just kind of giving announcements about releases and stuff. I don't do as much interaction and writing on there as I used to, just because I spend so much time working on books.
I love WordPress.com. It was a fantastic place. I was getting a lot of feedback. I was getting a lot of connections with other
Mhm.
writers. And when I started this podcast, I couldn't do anything but start a standalone. I had to go to WordPress.org, which
Mm.
doesn't give you called the doesn't give you as much. Oh, my brain went to sleep. It's
It,
what
it doesn't carry it over from what I understand.
you can get the followers, but you can't use that. You can't publish on their little newspaper thing.
Ah, okay.
So kind of you feel really isolated. But I don't know.
That's good to
My
know.
brain went to sleep, Joshua.
That's good to know. I didn't know that. I haven't been over on WordPress.org. I ended up going over to Weebly, getting the domain name, and building the website that you've seen, and then just linking my WordPress over to that, which I'll
And the thing
admit,
is,
I've used GoDaddy, I've used Weebly. I feel like Weebly is more user friendly for those of us that don't know HTML code.
I don't know anything about HTML. I'm completely um I am I don't know anything about it, unfortunately. And when I looked at your Weebly, I'm like, oh, he doesn't have anything on here. It's completely empty. That's unfortunate. I know you have 85,000 followers. It just that doesn't carry over. You know what I mean? You have all this work. You have all these words that you should be able to carry over with you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. You don't see that on the Weebly site. You got to click on the link and go to the blog to find it. Yep. But I agree.
The good thing about WordPress.org is I was able to at least take all of my work that I've done,
Ah, okay.
and I was able to take my followers. But the work that I'm putting up, I could not put back over to WordPress.com. So my followers are like, "Oh, he's done." I don't know, but the good thing is, I'm just wondering, email and like email my followers and say, "Hey, I'm putting work up." I just don't want to be intrusive.
You know, the thing that I oftentimes say about email is that people get to choose to see your email, where there's about any other platform, they don't get to make that choice. And so for me, I assume that if people are subscribing to me, they want to get those updates and see what's going on instead of me necessarily tweeting at them or Facebooking or what have you.
What you're saying? If I have the email, I might as well use it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Which for me, the newsletter, which I don't know how exactly you use yours, but I have a newsletter that I send out weekly. And I love my newsletter followers. It's wonderful to get fan mail back from them. I do surveys where I get to know what they really want from me and what content would be good for them. This is something, again, that I recommend to a lot of folks that are starting out is build you a survey through Google Docs. Ask questions about what readers want or what they don't want, and do that before you send them any content. And then you at least know if you're bugging them or not, or they have an ability to tell you what they want to see.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's really
Good
easy.
point.
I mean, it takes 10 to 15 minutes to go put together a survey and then shoot it out to them and say, hey, fill this out. I don't want to spam you. Let me know what you want to see from me.
Well, I figure I started this process about a year ago. I mean, I was writing a novel. You know what I mean? I've been very, you know, living life, not doing
Mm-hmm.
social work, more dedicated lately.
Mm-hmm.
So, you told me that you were doing a cross country trip. Where are you
Oh,
going?
yeah, I'm headed off to go see family, actually.
Oh, family. Okay, I thought you were doing some kind of book tour.
Yeah, well, I'm bringing some books with me just in order to get signed for future book stuff that's going on. But yeah, I'm going to be going and seeing family for a few days.
Where are you visiting to?
Kansas. I currently live in North Carolina,
Oh,
so I'm heading back home.
North Carolina. Do you like it?
I do. I of course moved down here after I was in Alaska, and it's I definitely fit in. I think with East Coast mentality, which is working well in my favor. It's different than living in the Midwest and in the last frontier up north. But it's beautiful country. The weather's nice. I mean, it doesn't snow. I think we had flakes for maybe one day over the winter. It was a different
But
experience, but the people here are nice and it's gorgeous.
when North Carolina is split, there's the mountains and there's the coast. What part do you live in?
I'd probably just say the mountains. I'm right around Charlotte, so I'm south of the
Oh,
mountains just a
Charlotte.
little ways. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. I did the Gatlinburg side of the Smokies a little bit. I've
Hmm.
seen Nashville. It's definitely live in Nashville if given an opportunity.
Yeah, we drive up that way probably every couple of months up there, and the Smokies are gorgeous. They just, I don't know. After being in Alaska, where everything's just gigantuan,
Hmm.
being out here where you got something a little bit smaller and got the color to it, it's nice.
Scariest thing that's ever happened to me is I decided to do the Blue Ridge Parkway right as the sun was going down.
Oh,
Fog came out,
mm-hmm.
and when the sun disappeared, I could not see anything. I could see like maybe a foot in front of my car, and the side of the mountain was just a cloud of white. I thought I was going to die.
Oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying.
I'm like going 3 miles an hour, thinking all of a sudden there was going to be nothing, and I would feel my stomach leave my body.
And the awful piece is that some of the folks that are native to the land don't necessarily follow those same precautions. So at
They're
any time
behind me.
you have somebody come up and rear end you as they're flying around those curves.
They're tailgating me, going, "What the hell is wrong with this dude? Why is he going so slow?" Tearing around me at like 45 miles an hour, honking their horn. My
Mm-hmm.
heart's going like 1,000 miles an hour in my chest.
And like I said, I came from Kansas where everything's flat and you can see, 20 miles in front of you as you're driving along. So driving in the mountains is a little bit different too.
Well, I'm in the city, man. If I see country, I expect types of horrible things to happen. I think Alaska. I think grizzly bears. I
There
mean,
are bears
basically,
out there. I didn't see any bears until I drove back down to the United States through Canada. And I seen bears when I was in Canada, but I was up there for 2 years, never seen a bear in Alaska. I seen a lot of moose. I seen elk, seen eagles. Um, Never any bears until I was driving back through Canada.
my brother and I were in the Smoky Mountains, Gatlinburg. First day there, he was walking through a park smoking a cigarette, and bear, like there was a black bear right in front of him while he was smoking a cigarette. He had an embolism right there. It was a black bear. He almost died. Okay, we're going back home.
The secret, from what I know, is you just make a lot of noise.
Just stood there prepared to die.
You just accepted his fate.
Yeah, this is it. This is how it ends. A
So,
black bear is going to maul me right now.
so what do you write, Brian?
The piece that I have on Amazon right now is noir, an urban noir piece.
Oh, okay.
I write about people who do bad things and look for redemption and basically die.
I'll be
Um,
honest, I haven't read any noir. I've heard of folks that have delved into that genre, but I've never read any myself.
it's it's old fashioned.
Mhm.
It's not really something people write anymore. Um, I'm currently writing science fiction, delve into fantasy too, writing
So,
fantasy.
yeah, I've heard more about the sci fantasy stuff becoming popular.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about tech, and the science fiction kind of falls under the umbrella of fantasy. So I kind of the science fiction fantasy stuff.
Hmm.
Mainly short fiction though.
Yeah,
Travels.
I started into sci-fi a little bit myself, and then I realized that I'm much better at reading sci-fi and watching it than I am writing it. I just don't know enough to pull the story together.
Like, are you concerned about technology?
Yeah, I'm concerned that it is not going to meet the level of expectation of the readers. Like there's gonna be able to tear it apart with critique and be like, yeah, this doesn't even make any sense.
What kind of science fiction do you read?
Star Trek.
Oh, Star Trek stuff, like the
Yeah.
serials.
Hmm.
I like that stuff. I wish I read more of it. Star
Yeah.
Trek it's already got Bibles though.
Yeah, it does.
So I mean, if you
Yeah.
wanted to read it, it's got all the tech for you already written.
Well, yeah, but that just sets the bar way too high. I mean, I don't want to take the time to go and read through all those things. I guess that's where I'll just sit back and be entertained for a while.
That's what makes that's what I do when when I write the stuff is if I have a question about the tech, I just look it up and I fill in the gaps basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I do the
That
same
makes
thing with
complete sense.
fantasy too.
Now, fantasy, I spend a lot of time researching. I don't know why I find that more entertaining for myself, but I like to joke about the time that I spend looking at stuff. I mean, I spent 6 hours studying how caves work just so I could write one scene to figure out, how the air was flowing and what plant life could be there and those types of things. I spent another 6 hours once studying how tea was made in ancient China just for one scene to see that they could actually
Yeah,
drink tea and what herbs went into that.
that
Uh,
brings up a fascinating subject of world building.
mhm.
Your world building, how much effort do you put into it?
I spend copious amounts of time world
So
building.
I
Uh,
talked to many writers about world building. A guy named Jason Abbott spent almost a decade of his life building a world with no characters in it, just so he can put characters in it.
I would probably be in that same boat as him. I started building my world for Thrice Nine Legends when I was about 14 years old. Um, and I didn't publish the first book for that until I was about 27 or 28. So I have a full world, full map, loaded with cities and governments and NPCs and gods, and the whole 9 yards is all put together. All I got to do is pluck people out and write stories about them.
Fascinating. And do you do role playing for that world too?
I used to run my D&D campaigns around that world, and I would put them into my world and have them play through it, which was wonderful when I was younger, but I haven't done that for a long time.
Do you write with the same? Do you write with D&D rules, or do you have your own rules?
I have my own rules. It's more of just having them explore my populations and my NPCs in there. But my world is actually built around Slavic mythology instead of European mythology. And so,
Slavic, like Witcher.
yep. Yes, yeah. So it's got Slavic gods, Slavic creatures, Slavic monsters. It's very different. You're going to find a whole new strew of things in my books than you'll find in other books.
That's fucking fascinating. Well, I don't know how you feel about cursing, but it's really, really fascinating. Can you go through the pantheon of Slavic gods?
I
Is it
can.
really?
I'm sorry.
If it's not too difficult.
I can definitely go through it. Now, I know that I changed a few of their names a little bit for my own stuff. And of course, the interesting thing about Slavic mythology is that a lot of what was done by the Slavs was lost to history when the Crusades came through. So a lot of it's speculation, which gave me some room to kind of play with ideas and build it together. But there's 12 gods that are in my mythology. The I don't know how much of this you want me to get into, but
Get into it as much as you want, my friend.
but my high god is Svarog, which is a high god of wisdom and fire. He's called the grandfather of the gods. And he rules over thrice 10 kingdom, which I'm sure a lot of people would probably heaven would be like. But he rules over that place. He never comes to earth. He's the high god that oversees that, and he oversees all the rest of the gods. And then we have Param, which is the thunder bearer, and he's the creator of men, as well as all the other races in my books. I have a total of 9 races that take place in my world. And then we have Strega, who is the god of wind and water. He essentially manages the 9 winds and the seas. Daz is the light bringer. He's rules over the sun. He's the one that's primarily worshipped in my books. And he is considered to be the protector of men, because when Param created man and said, yeah, they're lame, we don't actually need this creature on our earth, Daz is the one that said, hey, let's go ahead and keep them. So he's considered to be the protector. Lada is the goddess of love. Savathavet is the god of war and glory. And he plays a pretty big part in the books as well. A lot of different races worship him for honor and glory and all those wonderful things. Yarrow is the god of harvest and rebirth. He's considered to be the trickster and the god of fertility. Zern is the god of darkness, which I'll get to this in a little bit. There's dark and light, but there's not really good and evil in my books. Mokash is the goddess of envy, and also magic. Marhina plays a huge piece in my books as well. She's considered to be the frozen witch and the goddess of the netherworld. A lot of people would probably consider the netherworld to be kind of like hell, but it plays a different role in my books. Maestra is the moon goddess, and then Wolos is the god of death, who ushers people across the Kalinov Bridge into the Netherworld to essentially be judged on whether or not they get to continue on to Thrice Tin Kingdom or not.
Hmm.
And so what I'm playing with here is, although there's these 12 gods, they much work like cogs in a wheel.
Hmm.
They all have a purpose. They know what their purpose is, and they are dedicated to keep the balance of the world in check. None of them are good, none of them are evil. They all have their place. And so, even though you have a goddess of the netherworld and a god that rules over Thrice Tin Kingdom, they don't really they aren't really considered to be good and evil in their own mind, but mortals give them attributes of being good and evil and call them good and evil and try to judge others based on that, even though there's no real truth to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask about death in your world.
Uh-huh.
Character dies. There's an afterlife, or is it
Yes.
permanent to it? He does.
The,
No.
the, the way that it's lined up is that every character has a charge in life, something that they're supposed to complete in their life. They don't know what this is, of course. They have to seek it out and discover it. But that charge may be to grow old with a family. That charge may be to go into battle and die on the field. That charge may be to spread a religion. All of them have some sort of purpose in the world that they're supposed to do. If they discover that charge and they complete it, then they're able to move on to Thrice Tin Kingdom and live in the hereafter with the highest god. If they don't complete that charge and they die, they go to the netherworld where they're warped by magic and turned into a demon.
Okay, and that's it for them.
Yeah.
They're a demon. They can never go back and like try again.
Nope. There's not reincarnation in my world. Yep,
Cold, man.
that's it. And Winterfell, what you're reading, that book is about the two brothers, Dress and Tyrion, going out at the behest of their father to kill the god of the dead in hopes of gaining immortality. But since the god of the dead ushers folks to either the netherworld or to Thrice Tin Kingdom, and essentially puts people in their place on where they're supposed to be at, when he dies, so I'm giving spoiler alerts here. In the end of that book, when he dies, what that essentially does is makes it so that nobody can go to the Thrice Tin Kingdom. So everybody becomes a demon, and the netherworld overflows with demons, and there's no room for them. So they start pouring back out onto the earth, and that's what happens in Melkorka, Daenerys, and Maharia, is folks seeing that progression take place where all the demons are coming back to earth because there's no more room for them in the afterlife.
You said this is based on the Slavic gods, or it is based on the Slavic gods?
It's based on the Slavic gods. The names are very familiar. They have similar roles, but I play a little bit into it about what the afterlife actually is because we don't have records of that.
It's very interesting. So the Slavic uh, the Slavic pantheon is very. It kind of sounds like the Greek pantheon in a way.
Yeah, a little bit it is. Mm-hmm.
I guess the Norse pantheon is kind of like built on the same kind of thing. I guess it's connected in a way. I wonder how that worked. I get the Vikings kind of had a
Yep.
I recall that went down in that area. It started with a
Mm-hmm.
D. It's interesting.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The reason that I understand for why it worked that way is that when we look at migratory patterns of human beings, we migrated from the Netherlands down through Greece and into lands like Czechoslovakia and Russia into a circular format. So people carried those beliefs from the north in Norse mythology and brought them down, and they molded over time, which is wonderful to read about. But even the world tree that we read about in Norse
The world tree,
mythology,
yeah.
Yskradil, is called the ash tree in Slavic mythology. So in my books, they're all fighting to save the ash tree, which is the world tree. They're just called different things depending on what mythology you're looking at.
So you're saying that the Norse brought their religion south.
That's what my understanding is from some of the texts that I've read, but it's been years since I initially did the research when I first writing the books.
I wonder how they got the connection to the Greeks, though. I guess the Greeks would have had to brought it north, though, than the north.
Well, I don't know. Did the Norse start with it or did the Greeks?
I would imagine the Greeks, though, because they're the oldest of the two by at least 1,500 years.
Oh, you know your history better than me today.
I'd actually, I
I
don't
really
know.
don't
Maybe
know
they're,
that.
yeah. Because I mean, they originated democracy, right? They actually predated the Romans anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. Considered it though until this conversation. So maybe I'm going to be on Wikipedia a little bit after we get done.
Yeah, yeah. It'd be fascinating to look at. I mean, I know that the Greek are older, but I don't know. I thought that some of those Norse myths came before the Greek, but I really don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think what was up there prior to. I guess there wasn't much because I'm thinking about the Iceman who died. What, hunter gatherer? The Romans. That means he died before the Greeks, and he didn't really have anything. So what does that mean? You know who I'm talking about, right? The guy from the Alps.
The Iceman from the Alps?
He was mummified. They found him.
I'm trying to
He
remember this. This is
he.
like way back when, like in like 3000 BC or something, right?
I believe they found. Yeah, exactly. Something along those lines.
I remember reading
It's
about this.
the
I know it was some odd name. Like
yeah.
some,
They call him the Iceman. He predates the pyramids by a few thousand years.
here we go. Wikipedia is telling me it's called the Otzi.
The Otzi.
Yeah,
What's the
Otzi.
Otzi?
That's the name of the guy. Otzi or Otzi is the name of the Iceman. Yeah, found in the Himalayan mountains.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I just found the X-Men.
I don't know, I've seen a lot of fascinating things actually coming out of science lately. It's going to be interesting what we learn about our history in the next few years. I know that they've been working for the past 10 years to unmask that fossil they found under the sea of a fully preserved dinosaur, and they're getting closer to essentially being able to look at that closer to figure out where it came from. And then just not long ago, they've been unearthing those burial sites of the I want to call them halflings, but they're essentially half-sized men. They found burial sites just full of skeletons of them.
What I'm really interested in is they're actually thinking about cloning in an attempt to potentially end global warming.
Really?
Yeah, they're saying that global warming will actually increase with the ice melting because of the man. The I'm telling you, man. What is it? 10:30. My brain is completely dead.
Well,
There's
we
the
definitely live
Otzi.
in interesting times. I mean, I know that they're getting closer to hopefully reversing aging. They just recently were able to reverse aging in mice, and they're hoping to start human
Mhm.
studies soon. We got, of course, people now going independently with space travel, and they're making some advances there. It's going to be very curious what happens in the next 10 to 20 years. Hopefully, we'll make some
What
progress.
genetic manipulation? China's reversing aging too.
Mm-hmm.
It is Otzi. This is exactly who I'm talking about. BCE. And
Oh,
he didn't
excellent.
have the religion. He's a hunter gatherer. The Greeks somehow, I mean, the religions they sound so familiar, different than the Egyptians who worship the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Zeus was a thunder god, wasn't he?
Yes.
Had lightning. Same as Odin, like the Slavic god.
Mm-hmm.
The commonalities are amazing.
Yeah, I would.
Humans, Oh,
Did I cut you off?
I was waiting for you to finish,
I was gonna
and then
say
I
it's
thought
gonna
maybe
be
I lost you.
interesting if we ever find the answers for a while those similarities come about. I mean, we speculate forever, but
My thinking is that we're human. I mean, we have the same brain. I mean, obviously, we're going to be thinking the same way, and we live on the same earth. We have the
hmm
same stimulus, the same food. We need the same things to live. We're born the same way. We die the same way.
hmm
Kind of mysteries. We're trying to, what happens when we die. We have the same type of. So I mean, we're going to come up with the same kind of questions, and the answers are going to be similar, I think.
yeah, I honestly don't have a whole lot of argument with that. I know it sounds very Darwinian, but I honestly like even some of those examples of how morality came about. It's some of the things that essentially just came to our basic reasoning.
And I think it's very simple. This guy, the fascinating story of this Otzi guy in the middle of the Alps. They say that he was maybe a war party. Maybe he got ambushed. It's just a guy, right? 3,000 years ago. They found them preserved.
And was it that they didn't find anything else around him? I mean, there's no village or no other sign of civilization, just him trekking through the Alps?
Just him trucking through the Alps, that up protecting himself. Wounds he had, was killed brutally.
That's very, very fascinating. I don't know. I haven't been able to keep up. And I was talking about this a little bit earlier. There's just so much knowledge out there anymore available to us that it's hard to keep up on every given topic. I was joking earlier today with my better half that it's fascinating to see how the internet has changed essentially our culture over the past 15 years or so. It used to be that we would all sit down and have conversations to see what we could learn or what else there was to find out. And now we seem to have conversations to show other people how much we know.
Yeah, and even if we don't know something, we can we can look it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That,
everyone's an expert in everything nowadays.
oh man, remember when we were kids, you didn't know something, you could just pretend. You could just pretend like you knew something. It would just be this gigantic debate about how much you knew, and it could just be complete bullshit. It could be
Which I got
nothing.
to say, it's got to be terrible for teachers nowadays that, a kid in the back room can just Google it on their iPhone and figure out the answer and call the teacher out.
Right? Oh man, I would not want to be in the education system nowadays. That these poor teachers, I mean, they're basically just teaching for a test anyway.
That's very true. That's where a lot of my
Yeah.
criticisms come from that we didn't really get into. But it's the standard testing that really irks me some days, which I know that a lot of teacher curriculums, in order for them to get their degree, does not include a child development class
Nope.
at all. And I mean, teachers can take that and they can use that as part of their extracurricular classes. But knowing that we have standards being built for children that aren't based on child development blow my mind.
No, it's our education system is really sad. I mean, I was an athlete too. I played football, and that's basically why I went to school.
Mhm.
I went to school to lift weights and to play football. That's the only reason I went.
See, I went to school because my
And
mom told me to.
okay, I really enjoyed playing football and lifting weights. I didn't care about anything else. And art class. If they had theater, I would have done that. Really appealed to me.
Yeah, I did a lot of theater. I did plays and I did independent duet acting when I was in high school. I loved doing that. Went to state for it several times.
And
Um,
basketball and track, right? I mean,
yeah,
if it hadn't have been for those things, you probably would have. I mean, your mom told you, but you had things that you were passionate about.
yes, I will give you that.
Kids love things. I mean, you have things that you're passionate about, and if you don't have that stuff, you end up being a juvenile delinquent to some degree, and you end up in your office or somebody like yourself. And
hmm See, my thing is comes much more on the geek side, which is where I fell at. I mean, I had my friends that had similar interests to me. I mean, even my freshman year of high school, we were breaking down human characteristics and grading them and watching classmates and essentially bringing our data back to each other and studying it. And when we weren't doing that, we were writing out computer code to go back home and make programs on our computers and then test them out with one another. So
you guys sounded like cool dudes. I didn't have friends like that in high school. I didn't have really any friends in high school, unfortunately. I was pretty much a loner. When did you decide that you were going to be an extrovert? Was that in high school or was that much later on?
It was much later on. It was after I was in social work and just realized that being an introvert and being a social worker did not go hand in hand.
Oh man, I've just recently decided I needed to be more of an extrovert. When I started this podcast, I decided I need to be more of an extrovert.
And my journey there was interesting. I mean, doing meditation, and I did a lot of reading. I read a lot of books on Buddhism, and a lot of that stuff I think helped me kind of make that jump over. But being an introvert isn't necessarily a terrible thing, and I think that oftentimes in popular culture, it's not defined well. I mean, being an introvert really means that you need longer times by yourself to essentially plug back in and get energy to go back out. I mean, I know for myself, if I go out to a book signing, I am exhausted for like 3 days after that because I have to have that time to reboot and get my energy back. It's better than what it used to be, but I don't necessarily shy away from social events.
I'll get off this phone. I'll get off this podcast with you, and I will think about it for the next day or two. I'll replay every single thing that I flubbed, like not being able to pull words out of my brain. I'll think, oh my God, why weren't you able to think? So you've got a book coming out. And what's that book called again? I apologize.
No problem. Blood and Bile is the book that's coming out. It's the first book in the Legacy series, and it's out on June 7th. You can find it on Amazon now. And it's for pre-order, so folks can get a hold of that now. Go ahead and put it in their queue so it's delivered straight to their Kindle, or they can wait until the date and order the print book. I myself, go ahead.
Best place to get that would probably be your Amazon author page.
Yep. Go to my Amazon author page. I'm pretty easy to find, honestly, Brian. If you type in Joshua Robertson, writer, author, fantasy, whatever, and click go on Google, I'm like the first 5 pages. Or you can go to Amazon and search for me, and I'm going to pop right up. I'm really easy to find.
And your Twitter is Joshua Robertson writer, or is it just Joshua Robertson?
My Twitter is actually Robertson Writes, WRITES, and that's my username for a lot of different places, including my website. Joshua Robertson, I guess, is a popular name, so I went with something a little bit different.
It really is, actually. I did a Google for Joshua Robertson, and I ended up looking at a very scary looking dude for a minute, going, okay, I hope this isn't who I'm talking to.
I will say that I lost a few rankings about a month ago because I guess something happened in California with some guy where he kidnapped somebody or something. Yes. Yeah, he stole my rankings on Google.
That's a very scary looking guy. I was like, no.
I'm the good looking one.
You are also a fascinating guy to talk to, and I'm so happy I got to spend a couple of hours, or at least an hour and a half with you tonight.
I appreciate anything?
Yeah, man, you're a really cool guy.
I don't think so. I guess if folks want to get a little bit more into my personal life, me and my better half do run a YouTube channel called Goblin Horde, GOBLINHORDE, and that's where we
show notes.
I don't think that I sent it to you, actually. It's just a fun thing that we do. We do get some sponsorships every now and then on there, but we have a blended family. We have 9 kids together, which are our little goblins, and we do adventures with the family, whether it's just going out and nerding out or going to, watch Harry Potter or playing a game at home. Essentially like a vlog of just our family on YouTube.
Add that to the show notes so people can check it out.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, you can bug us on there. And of course, my better half, Lillian Oak, is also a writer. So her and I like to say we're living the dream sometimes because we just get to sit back at night, put the kids to bed, and drink tea and write our books together. But
if she wants to hang out and talk for an hour, I'd be more than happy to host them, find out how they're thinking about their careers or whatever. That I'm more than happy to have them on the podcast.
Absolutely. I can definitely pass the word on. I'm sure they'd both be interested.
Excellent. And it was really fantastic talking with you. And thanks for hanging out.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Josh. And that was Joshua Robertson. Like I said, his stuff is in the show notes. As far as contact information, he is on Twitter, he is on WordPress, he is in the World Wide Web in a lot of different ways. Author page on Amazon. Highly recommend you buy his stuff. And next time, who I have got is J.M. DeBoard, a Jungian scholar. The dude knows Carl Jung backwards and forwards. We got into some dream interpretation discussion. Great conversationalist. Until then, Brian Yellow on Twitter, brianyellow.com is the website, and have a great day. Bye-bye.